trying to escape negative emotions like feeling stressed or feeling anxious or feeling bored. And we eat to feel better because when we eat, like I said, we get this hit of dopamine. We have that sense of pleasure and reward.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited because we have Dana Skoglund on the line. Dana is an Ayurvedic lifestyle and health coach. She's also done thousands of hours of yoga practice and has actually trained other yoga teachers as well. She has some really great methodologies for habit and behavior change. And I'm really curious for myself because I've heard a lot of great things about the Ayurvedic lifestyle, Ayurvedic health. I'm sure you've probably heard as well, or if you've looked at different types of supplements or ways of changing your health, you may have seen the word Ayurvedic come up. But me personally, I don't know a whole lot about what it is or what that means. So, Dana, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really excited to have this discussion with you here today.
I am so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's start by, I guess, kind of the basics a little bit here. So what does Ayurvedic health or Ayurvedic lifestyle kind of mean to you?
Yeah, well, the word itself, Ayur, means knowledge or science or wisdom, and Veda is life. So it's really like the science of life or the knowledge of life. And one of the translations that I love and kind of the way that I like to look at it is it's the art of living. And it's really how to live in accordance to the cycles of nature. And one of the principles of Ayurveda is that we're not separate from nature. So everything that's happening in the environment outside is also happening on a microcosm level in our bodies. So when we understand the relationship between what's happening outside and what's happening inside, and we start to sync up with that, then our body just works better. Like our digestion improves, our hormones balance out, we have more energy, we sleep better, we lose weight effortlessly. So all these great things happen when we live the way that we're actually supposed to live and the way that we lived thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago when we were more in touch with nature and the cycles of nature.
Wow, that just makes so much sense. It just feels good. It feels right.
Yeah.
So what exactly then? So let's say someone comes to you as potentially a client or something like that. What are some of the first things that you'll kind of check in or look into, or common problems that you see a lot?
Yeah, so we do kind of like a lifestyle assessment. So I find out what time they're waking up, when are they eating, obviously, what are they eating, what time they're going to bed, how are they sleeping, what digestive issues they may have, what other symptoms they have. And usually pretty quickly, I can find out just even, when you're doing certain things, what the problem is. And that's the easiest place to make shifts. And it's the smallest things that we can do that make the biggest impact on energy and on all those things I mentioned before.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, I remember seeing something that you wrote about, like circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
So yeah, talk to me a little bit about that. Cause some
Yeah.
people, you kind of hear about it, and I remember when I was younger, right? I was in my 20s, and of course, you know it all when you're in your 20s. And someone said something about like, going to sleep, or this is the optimal time to go to sleep. And I was like, how does my body know what time it is anyway? Like, who cares if I just get to sleep or whatever? So I realize now that's obviously absolutely wrong. But yeah, can you go into a little bit about that?
Yeah. So basically, one of the principles of Ayurveda is that everything is governed by the 5 elements and like the energies of the 5 elements. So everything in the universe, including us, we're comprised of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And not obviously literally these elements, but the different qualities of these elements. So in the different times of the day are governed by different elements. For example, when the sun is highest in the sky, that's obviously fire element. That time of the day between 10 and 2 is when fire element predominates. And the fire element is also connected to our digestive fire. So when the sun is highest in the sky, our digestive fire is actually burning the hottest. And on a physical level, our bile, we have the most amount of bile. And bile is what helps us break down proteins and fats. So we can break down, we have the best ability to break down heavier foods and a bigger meal in the middle of the day. And when the sun goes down, that digestive fire also goes down and we have less and less bile. So when we're eating a really heavy late dinner, then we're literally not breaking it down as effectively as we would if we're eating later, and especially like in the middle of the day. And this is what we used to do, like pre-industrial revolution, we would have the main meal in the middle of the day. And then once everyone went to the factories, they took their little bag lunch, and the main meal, the family meal, got moved to the end of the day. So that's, again, it's like we're putting a lot of stress on our bodies. And I don't know if you've ever experienced having like a super late meal, maybe Thanksgiving or something like that. And the next day you wake up and you literally feel like it's in your belly, like you haven't digested it. It's like sitting there.
Yeah.
So that's one way. So that's one example that makes a lot of sense when we hear it. It's like, okay, yeah. And now culturally, I know before I knew this stuff, I wasn't really having lunch. I'd either like be snacking throughout the day, or I was having a small lunch, like a sandwich or something. And then I'd have my big meal like at 8 at night. So that's really common in our culture to have that big meal at the end of the day, but it's also one of the worst things we can do for our health.
Yeah. I definitely see that quite a bit. And even myself too, I don't eat a whole lot in the morning. So I tend to get hungrier, and I've got to almost sometimes force myself to eat a little bit earlier. Otherwise it's like, it can come around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And then I'm eating a big meal at that time, which, like you said, kind of the only way to make up for it when it's too late is kind of skipping breakfast the next morning, because you still feel it from the night before.
Right. And the thing is, when we don't eat enough during the day, we are hungrier at night.
Yeah.
And we tend to overeat at night. So a lot of people try to kind of manage their eating throughout the day, but then they're eating the most calories at night, which is, the worst thing we can do. And also, and like you said, with starting the day with a lighter meal, it's like the sun. So when the sun's just waking up, our digestive fire is just waking up. So having breakfast be smaller, and then lunch being bigger, and then dinner being, again, a little bit smaller. And it's also individual. So one of the things of Ayurveda, there's no necessarily one size fits all approach to how much you should be eating, or even like the right foods that work best for your body. So that's really something we all kind of have to experiment and observe in ourselves. Like, I know you talk a lot about inflammation, and there are foods that create inflammation for everyone, but then there's foods that some people are fine with and it doesn't, and some people do. So that's where we have to really observe our own symptoms and notice cause and effect when we eat certain foods, and how much is the right amount, because some people need more food than others.
You're 100% right. I've been actually thinking about that a lot recently. Because when I had a lot of inflammation, like I went, I guess, paleo, right? Eliminated sugar and grains and fried foods, and I essentially healed myself. And then I basically am like, this is the way to eat. Like, everyone's crazy if they don't eat like this. Like, what's wrong with everyone? And then it's like, but it's really interesting. And then you hear like some people, doctors, even like a Dr. Gundry saying, well, no, these plants are horrible for you. And, these plants are the only ones you should eat. And then, vegans are eating beans, and Gundry's like, don't ever eat beans. And, it's like, it's so interesting. And I have definitely realized and come to the conclusion now that I'm, much more open to it, and have learned a lot, and have seen so many different people, that there is really no one size fits all. Yeah. Each person is different. Some people might have a reaction to tomatoes because it's a nightshade, and some people might feel great on tomatoes, like my wife. Right. So
totally. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I experienced the same thing. So I found out I had an autoimmune disease like 6 years ago. And so I went all in on anti-inflammatory eating and like autoimmune protocol, which is similar to how you eat. And again, like within a few months, my autoimmune was in remission. It has been ever since. And I also like feel so good eating this way, which is essentially paleo and minimal. Sometimes I'll have a little bit of rice, but really minimal grains, no legumes, no sugar. Like I'm completely sugar free. But Ayurvedically, like traditionally, so Ayurveda comes from the same place that yoga comes from. It's over 5,000 years old. It's the oldest healing science in history. And the traditional Ayurvedic diet is rice and like mung beans. It's like a traditional dish. Well, that's one of like the traditional dishes. It's like the traditional kind of detox dish.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I do a lot and is part of Ayurveda is seasonal detoxing, and just kind of taking out the trash and hitting the reset button and resetting your cravings and your taste buds and all that. So I did those detoxes. And then when I kind of shifted my diet, I decided I'm going to try the Ayurvedic detox again and just see. And I felt terrible. Like I just felt sluggish. I didn't like how like the rice and mung bean felt in my belly, but some people feel amazing on that. And it really works for them, and it really helps, it helps them heal their body. So yeah, it's like the only way to really find out what works best is to do an elimination diet and then slowly introduce and really like do that in a very slow, methodical way so you can accurately see how these different foods affect you.
Interesting. Yeah. And on that elimination diet, which I've heard, you've heard a lot of people talk about, when you would say advise someone to go on an elimination diet, what would they be eating in the beginning of that?
Yeah.
And then how would they start expanding that?
Yeah. So it is essentially the way you and I eat. So it's no legumes, no grains,
Right.
no sugar, no caffeine, no alcohol, no gluten, no dairy. I think that's pretty much the main ones.
Yep.
You can even go even more extreme that I don't, but you can go like nuts and seeds, like removing nuts and seeds. I do eliminate any nightshades. So, the tomatoes and potatoes and peppers. So an egg and even like I eat eggs, so I don't usually eliminate those, but that is another one that can cause problems for a lot of people.
Which is amazing because for me,
Yeah.
it's just like such a superfood. I eat like
Yeah.
5 eggs almost every day. And,
Yeah.
Other people are like, oh, I eliminated eggs and I felt better. I was like, what?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting.
So, and you want to take those out. I offer a 10-day sugar detox. So we do all that for 10 days. But even if you are really trying to figure out your diet, you might even want to go a little bit longer, like a few weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, and then slowly reintroduce, like starting with dairy and waiting 3 days before you introduce anything else, and then gluten, and then waiting another 3 days. So you want to, really give yourself enough time to look at all the symptoms. So symptoms immediately after, symptoms an hour after, symptoms like how are you sleeping that night? How do you feel the next day? It's really, you want to keep a journal and keep track and observe and notice.
Interesting. Yeah. Again, my mind of like knowing what's right in health was like, nobody should be eating gluten. Like, in
Me
my
too.
mind,
I agree.
that's how I think. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I totally agree, but it's, yeah, some people are
At
like,
least
oh,
then they could
really
see.
good sourdough bread that has
True.
minimal gluten, but it's still the grain. And
True. But also it actually would just be good for people to know and see that, right? If they eliminate gluten and then introduce it back and they're like, oh, wow, I don't feel good. Okay. Now you actually have proof.
Right.
So that's real interesting. Are there, I mean, obviously you said kind of similar to me, like for me, sugar is just poison. Gluten is just poison. Fried foods, in these seed oils is basically just poison. So that's just how I look at it. So yeah, I wouldn't drink or eat poison, right? So I don't consume these things. Are there any, so is there anything that you would say as well? Just like in general, it's not good for anyone?
Yeah, all of those I completely agree with. Something I'm grappling with in my own life is knowing that alcohol is pretty much poison, but
yeah,
I drink minimally. I drink like a small glass of wine, maybe once or twice a week.
Yeah.
And that's come a long way from every night drinking like 2 or 3 glasses of wine. So that is kind of like my next phase of, I know how, nobody does well with alcohol, really nobody. It's not good for anyone.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to let go of something that, we've got attachments to, and there's a lot of pleasure in, around, and there's the social aspect. So that's one thing that I'm really kind of moving towards in my own awareness and starting to explore, because the way that I think anyone makes a permanent change is it's got to start in the mind, and you've got to really have a strong enough reason and basically change your thinking around something in order to change your behaviors. Otherwise, you're just relying on willpower, which doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And it's not a permanent fix, because we'll like white knuckle something for a little while because of, the shoulds, or, I'm trying to be healthy, or I'm trying to reach, a weight goal or something like that. But then it doesn't last and people aren't able to be consistent with it. So the
Yeah.
only way to maintain that consistency is to truly change how you think about something. So I know that's kind of whenever I am making a shift in my life, I start there, because then the behaviors are really easy, because it's
Yeah.
a natural effect of the thinking, versus trying to really try to change your behaviors when your thinking is still, I want it, it tastes good, it gives me pleasure and enjoyment, and then you're fighting against yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. I actually recorded a previous podcast about your identity around
Yeah.
health, right? And like, so yeah, I really love what you said, and I agree. I think thinking about the long-term results rather than short-term gratification, and really getting associated to that. Because it's funny you mentioned alcohol. Like, yeah, listen, I had some great times in my 20s, getting drunk or going out with friends or whatever. And sometimes I say, so now I haven't drank now in probably several months, just because I can't. Like believe me, sometimes we go out and it's like I would actually like to have a drink, but like I just know how I feel the next day. And I even tried ordering, these dry farm wines, biodynamic, low sulfate wines, and did those for a little while. But even those, like, I would just wake up the next day and it just didn't feel right. But then again, my wife, again, she can have a glass of wine and not be affected. So, and I think a lot of us that actually get into the health niche may be more sensitive than the average person. And that's kind of why we had a health challenge and have to be so picky with what we eat. I know that's for me. But yeah, I just can't do it. Like, I see or go out, everyone's drinking. I'm like, nah, it'd be nice to have a drink, but I'm like, no. Like, I know the last like several times I did that, I regretted it the next day. And so I just think about the long-term result, and I just can't do it.
Yeah, totally. And I think also what happens, those of us in the health niche, is that we get so used to a high level of just feeling really good, and our
Mhm.
tolerance for not feeling good gets super low.
I
So
know. I almost
most
feel like I'm a
people,
little too
yeah,
fragile
yeah.
sometimes. I wish I was more anti-fragile,
Totally. But a lot of people are so used to feeling crappy all the time and having just aches and pains and feeling heavy and bloated, and that's their normal. So
Mm,
when, I mean, it's totally dependent on what your normal is. So when you feel really good, and then I agree, you do get more sensitive to foods that aren't, or drinks that are not, that really do affect you. And especially when you do start to clean up your diet and you introduce something that isn't, you do feel it so much more. So it is kind of like the double-edged sword of getting healthy. It's kind
yes.
of the blessing and the curse, but I'll take it.
Right.
I'll choose this one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just circling back real quick to kind of the circadian rhythm, you
Yeah.
mentioned about something I'd never heard about, that 10 to 2, when the sun is the brightest,
Mhm.
you're actually more optimal for digestion and eating a bigger meal. And then what about sleep? Because I know that's the
Yeah.
main thing people talk about with circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that
Yeah.
a little.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting is when you think of a 24-hour cycle, in Ayurveda, there's 3 doshas, which are these energies that are comprised of these different elements. So the energies, and you might have heard these words being tossed around: pitta, kapha, and
Mhm.
vata. And so you
Yes.
can go online and take a what's my dosha test, and they will tell you, like, are you a pitta or predominant or vata? So there's 3 doshas, and there's a 24-hour cycle, and basically it goes around twice. So if you divide a clock, and when I'm teaching this, it's really helpful to have a diagram, and you divide a 12-hour cycle into thirds, and then that
Okay.
goes around twice. So I mentioned that first cycle of pitta, which is fire, like predominantly fire, is in the middle of the day, but the second cycle is in the middle of the night.
Mm,
So between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., that fire energy is actually meant for deep detoxification and repair and recovery, and our organs get cleansed, our brain gets cleansed, our liver goes into detox mode, the pituitary gland excretes human growth hormone. There's all these really important things that happen in that time of day, but only if we're sleeping.
mhm.
So if we're not sleeping, well, like if we're not getting good quality sleep or we're getting to bed too late, all that stuff is not happening adequately. And there was a really cool study, actually it was in a TED talk that I heard. It was a study about Alzheimer's and the connection between sleep problems and Alzheimer's.
Mm.
And when you are not getting good sleep, your brain is not getting clean. So it makes a lot of sense that that would over time lead to something like Alzheimer's. So
Yeah.
this 10 o'clock, I kind of think of it as like the witching hour. And I'm sure you've probably noticed this because whenever I teach this, everyone's like, yes, that totally happens. You might feel really tired at like 8:30, 9, but for whatever reason you stay up. Maybe you're watching, another episode of Netflix show or scrolling or something like that. And then 10 o'clock hits and it's almost like the lights turn on and you get the second wind and you feel more awake. So
Interesting.
that's that kind of fire energy that if you're not asleep, you will actually feel more alert, because fire, if you just think of the element of fire, the energy moves up. Even like a symbol for fire is an upward pointing triangle.
Hmm.
So energy moves up with fire energy. So we feel more awake. And not only that, but we also kind of feel like eating. So that's when we do like the midnight snacking, which this is the worst time to eat because we don't have bile, but we have like our metabolism is, and all our digestion is actually meant to be doing kind of that deeper house cleaning versus digesting heavy amounts of food. So we ideally want to be in bed before that 10 o'clock witching hour so that we get that full sleep between those, critical hours of 10 and 2. And there's a lot of studies that have shown the hours before midnight count as twice as much as the hours after midnight. So that's kind of like the most restorative sleep that we can get. So we want to maximize that as much as possible. So when I teach people, we start when we're kind of aligning our day to this clock, this ideal clock and these circadian rhythms. We start with having an earlier dinner. So eating I like to eat between 5 and 6, but really no later than 7. And when you're doing that, you're letting your body fully digest your food before bed. And then it's easier to get to bed earlier when you're eating earlier. And then you kind of get that whole cycle, that full cycle in.
Nice. Very interesting. What about something like me personally? I don't set an alarm. I like to wake when my body naturally rises, which for me tends to happen as the sun comes up. And I don't like being awake when the sun's not up. Like I hate turning on lights, in the morning. That's like the worst thing to me. I just seem to kind of naturally wake as the little bit of light, comes in, and I try to black out, as much as I can, but even a little bit of light seeps through and I tend to wake up. And it's even when the time changed, I noticed like I started waking up at a different time a little. Is there anything to kind of the sun rising and waking up? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it is all around the sun, right? The circadian rhythm. So absolutely. And although in Ayurveda, we actually want to take advantage of the pre-dawn hours. So the time before the sun goes up, and that's actually when the energy shifts. So in the pre-dawn hours, and I like to say approximately before 6, because depending on where you are, if you're in the north or in like closer to the equator, it can vary a lot. So I just like to use the landmarks of like 6 a.m. and going to bed by 10 p.m., even though, if you're in Alaska, that's irrelevant. So before 6, and I don't know if you have ever, if you ever do wake up kind of before 6, or I'm sure you have in your life at some point, there's this different quality to that time of day. It's quiet. There's a sense of peace and calm and spaciousness. And that is governed by the elements of air and space, like that time of day. And if you look at every single spiritual tradition in the world, they really revere this time of day. This is when like the Dalai Lama wakes up at like 4 a.m, and that's when he meditates, and that's when he does his spiritual practice. And pretty much every religion does this. So we want to actually wake up in that time, because that is when, first of all, our brains are most plastic. Like neuroplasticity is most available first thing in the morning. We're in that brainwave state that we can, when you were talking about identity, and I talk about that a lot as well, it's like this is the time of like reinvention and recreating ourselves and tapping into, if you think of the element of space, it's like limitless, it's possibility, it's potential. And that's when, most of us, we wake up, we hit the ground running, we're putting out fires, we're reacting to our lives, and we don't ever take time to actually carve out space to reflect on what we want and who we want to become, and where we're going and why it's important. So that's what we want to do in these pre-dawn hours, because this is when that energy is most available to us, and our brains are literally in that more plastic state when we can decide on purpose what we want and actually move towards that, and change our beliefs and change our identities to align with that.
Oh, I agree 100%. And that's actually exactly what I've done. And I credit, any success I have almost to, this being a big part of it, doing my visualizations and gratitude and quiet time. And I was just telling someone recently, and again, do not check your phone first thing in the morning, right? Social media or phone, or even like, I made a mistake one time, like, I just wanted to like send myself a reminder or something, and I turned my phone on, and then all of a sudden some text came up or something else, and I was like, just totally got me out of that kind of zone, this creation zone where I'm kind of thinking at the highest level of what's important to me, what am I grateful for, what do I want to do, who do I want to become. And so I tell everyone, if you can, take the first hour of the day, or however long you need, in the first hour, don't turn on your phone, and use this time for visualization, breathing, gratitude, meditation, yoga. And I think it's just so powerful. I think it's actually one of the biggest things that so many people miss is they just jump into their day and they go about their day and they're just like in their head all day, right? So like, even if you think about like being on your cell phone, which I feel like I could just feel that I'm closed off, like the tunnel vision, like you're looking at this little phone and you're like this. And there was something I learned a long time ago, like if you actually go outside and look up, to the open sky, you will become more open, right? So I like to try to go outside. I do try to be outside when the sun is rising. I know that's also beneficial, I think, for sleep.
For circadian, like resetting your circadian clock. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and I totally agree. And that's what there's very specific habits that I teach that are, in alignment with the Ayurvedic lifestyle. And so we talk about, evening time, so that you're preparing your body and mind for bed, you're getting good sleep, and then you're able to wake up earlier. Because a lot of people, because there's a kind of something really sexy about the morning routine, and people love to just zero in on that. But if you're not getting good sleep, and if you're not doing the right things the night before, it's really hard to get up and exercise in the morning and meditate and have this time, because you're going to be tired and you're going to feel sluggish and you're not going to get, enough sleep, which is really important. So it all fits together.
Yeah. What did I hear? I heard a line one time, like, sleep is the boss of you, or something like that, right? Like and I feel it too, like just the mental and physical energy. So great. So any other tips regarding sleep, since it's such a big thing?
I would just say that and we'll talk about that, the energy of that time of day. So between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. So the time, the 3 hours, 4 hours before sleep, that is governed by the elements of earth and water. So when we think of those elements, they're heavier, they're slower, they're more grounded. And that's what we want to do in our bodies and in our habits and in our routines. We want to slow down. We don't want to stimulate, which is what most of us do. We get in front of a screen and we stimulate ourselves, even whether we realize it or not. And most people think that if I'm, sitting on the couch or in bed watching TV, I'm relaxing. But the thing is about the stress response is that if you're a human in the modern world, you will get stressed. There's really no avoiding it. And the stress response gets triggered. So stress will find you for sure. It's inevitable, but you need to actively turn off the stress response. It doesn't just shut off on its own. So we have to actually do something to calm our nervous system and get back into that state of rest and relaxation and repair, which is the state that will help us get really good sleep. Because even if you try to get in bed on time, and a lot of people will try to do that, but they'll still wake up. Either they'll have a hard time falling asleep, or they'll wake up in the middle of the night for an hour or 2 hours. So what we do before bed to help our bodies get rid of the stress, like get out of the stress response, get into the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system
Mhm.
is really important. So doing something, and again, this is very individual. Some people, they have no trouble sleeping. They put their head on the pillow and they're out for a full, 8, 9 hours. And other people, those of us that have more of like the fire energy or the air and ether energy, that come more of those lighter, more stimulating energies, we need to do more to calm our nervous system. So I
Mm.
would say that you want to just look at what you're doing, and are you calming yourself enough? Are you giving yourself enough of that wind down before bed so that you are getting good quality sleep? Because it's not just about the quantity, it's also about the quality. So I would say, pay attention, try not to stimulate,
Mhm.
and some
Mhm.
movement after eating can be really nice, whether it's a walk in the summer or even just like tidying up around your house. That will help with digestion and also help just to release extra stress in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Um, yeah, I actually, it's interesting because when you mentioned that, I thought, oh wow, like yeah, there are people who are waking up and like I don't wake up in the middle of the night, so I think I take that for granted.
Yeah,
But yeah, I know that there are people that do, and for those people for sure. And when in stimulation too, right? Like watching TV can be very different if you're watching a comedy compared to
right.
watching some violent thing,
Yeah,
right? Um,
totally.
yeah, try to tell everyone, don't be very careful what you allow into your mind and the
Yeah,
stimulation. And so, and I make this mistake as well, just not too long. I always told everyone too, I don't watch violent things, I don't
me
do
too.
this. And then of course I got sucked into some show that, a bunch of people recommended, and then it started getting violent. And then next thing you know, I'm waking up in the morning with this some violent scene in my head, right? And it takes
Yeah,
me days to get it out of my head, and it's just really an awful thing. And I so now I said, okay, I'm done with that show, not watching that anymore, go back to my comedies if I am going to watch something.
yeah.
But it's really, yeah, you have to be really careful what you allow. And I think and yeah, be conscious of what you're putting in your mind.
That's a huge part of Ayurveda too, is it's not just what we're taking in terms of food, but it's what we're taking in terms of information, in terms of visual stimulus, in terms of what are we listening to, what are we watching, what do we, through all of our senses. And it really does, we have to process whatever we take in, and it will impact us. And absolutely, I'm so with you on that. I don't watch anything violent because I can tell, like I can feel the effect on my body, and I notice how my thoughts change and how my sleep isn't as good. But yeah, if you're waking up, or if anyone's waking up in the middle of the night, that's often elevated cortisol. So that is, again, you're not doing enough to get out of that stress response.
Mm,
And you've got good routine dialed in, which is why you're not waking up in the middle of the night. So you're exercising, you have that time for yourself, whether that's like meditation or something
mhm,
like that. And what you're eating also affects how you sleep. So if you have a
of
high
course.
sugar diet, you will have, it's going to elevate cortisol as well, and often won't sleep as well. So
Yeah, alcohol is definitely one. I don't wear the Aura ring anymore, but I wore the Aura ring for a while. The reason why I stopped wearing it was because I kind of tested what I wanted to test, and I found myself obsessed and waking up every morning like, what's my score? And then if the score wasn't good, it's like messing with my head, and I'm tired today. Wait, I wish I didn't know I was tired today.
yeah.
Kind of, you know. So I kind of stopped for that reason. But one of the things I did notice when back then, the couple times that I did drink, wow, sleep score was all messed up, from the
Yeah,
alcohol. So that
absolutely.
could be a big thing. People might be stressed and they're like, oh, let me just have a couple of drinks to take the edge off. Then
Yeah.
that's messing up their sleep. Then they're getting more tired the next day. Then they're kind of more stressed and not feeling good because of the tiredness. It's a really, really vicious cycle.
Yeah,
Mm,
or more coffee and more like grabbing the sugar, like quick fixes of energy, which
yeah.
then messes up the sleep the next night. And yeah, you get in this vicious cycle.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that really happens there. Interesting. Um, so what about behavior change? I know you talk a lot about behavior change and you have kind of a little model that you talk about. Let's get into that.
Yeah. So when I started learning about Ayurveda and changing my habits and then coaching others, I realized it's not about just telling people what to do. Like most of us know what to do. It's
Mm,
just a matter of changing our habits and changing our behaviors and taking different actions than we're used to. So I started to, well, I have a background in psychology. And then when I started teaching and coaching, I got into habit change and behavioral change. And then my background in yoga and life coaching, I pulled all these pieces together and realized that there's three main levers, like the three biggest levers that have the most impact on our actions. And they are our emotions, our environment, and what I call an evolved mindset. And we talked about that already, where it's got to change at the thinking level first, and the beliefs and the identity. And then there's that domino effect to our behaviors. So that's that part, which we talked about. And then environment.
And by the way,
just
just to jump in for a second, to tie that into the most powerful time of the day being in the morning, right? So that's a time, if you're someone who's overweight or not in good health, and you're like, I want to make a change, use that morning time, like we just talked about, to visualize and create and write down this new person that you want to be, and start creating the identity at that time. I think that's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And that's what I help my clients do. I help them with specific journal prompts to reprogram their brain so that they can prime their mind to be successful and to make the right choices and stay aligned with their goals. And that is part of the morning routine that
I love that
I teach. Yeah.
Great.
So that's the evolved mindset part. Environment is huge. So we are environmental creatures, and environment is stronger than willpower. So whatever we're surrounded with is constantly prompting us and cueing us to take, if you surround yourself with candy and chocolate, and your brain knows that that's going to produce a huge hit of dopamine. It's going to feel really good. It's going to taste really good. And so that's very much like primitive programming in our brain, that even if, our prefrontal cortex is like, that's not healthy, and that's going to create inflammation, and that's not good for me, and that's going to, cause me to gain weight, we still have this very strong pull of our primitive brain that's like, but it's going to taste really good and I want it.
Yep.
So one thing, the easiest thing obviously is just out of sight, out of mind. Like, don't put those things don't have them in your house, don't have them in your line of vision. And then you just won't be cued to have those kind of thoughts. Because as soon as you have this thing that is going to taste good in front of you, and you're surrounded by it, then it becomes this kind of fight with yourself. Unless you've really worked on your mindset and it's part of your identity. I don't eat that. That's not what I do.
In which case you wouldn't have it in the house anyway, right?
True. But sometimes we can't always control our environment. And that's why it's like, we don't want to only rely on that tactic, because we're going to be out in the world. We're going to be at restaurants. We're going to be in social situations, which is the hardest thing for so many people, is to be in environments where they are surrounded by those temptations and those triggers. And they have that, primitive brain, and that kind of, it's like the angel and the devil. It's the devil part of their voice is like, but just this once. It's all those justifications and all those excuses that come up. So when we can, we control our environment. But when we can't, we've got to use the other two. So the other two are the evolved mindset, and the third one, the third one is emotions. So our emotions drive behavior. And most people that struggle with making healthy food choices has a lot to do with reacting to their emotions. So there's two kinds of emotions when it comes to eating specifically. There's trying to escape negative emotions, like feeling stressed or feeling anxious or feeling bored. And we eat to feel better, because when we eat, like I said, we get this hit of dopamine. We have that sense of pleasure and reward. For a moment, we get relief from that emotion, but it's temporary. It's just instant gratification, which then causes more problems down the road. But in that moment, there's an escape. It's like we get to numb out for a little while. So learning how to process our emotions, how to not react to them, how to be able to understand where emotions are coming from and how to change them. I call that emotional empowerment. And that's a whole other thing. And then there's the emotions of urges and cravings, which again is that kind of primitive brain saying that I want that. Like that simple thought in our brain, we don't even realize we're saying it, is I want that. And that creates desire. It creates an urge. It creates a craving. And it's such a strong compulsion. It's like this urgent desire that most of us just react to that because it's so strong, it's so compelling. So knowing how to deal with those is also the thing. So it's kind of those two buckets. It's either we're running away from an emotion or we're reacting to this kind of compulsion to consume something.
Yeah, really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah, kind of, it's funny on the whole kind of like your environment part of it. I know there was this really overpriced health coach who used to fly into people's houses and just go and throw everything away, in their house. And it's like paid him a whole bunch of money. All he would do is come to your house and kind of throw everything away. But and so I would encourage everyone listening, if you want to make a change, go throw a bunch of stuff away. And I know it seems like it's wasteful in a way, but actually you're sending a message. Like wasting that, throwing that away and losing the money on that will probably help stop you from spending money on that again in the future. So I think it is powerful to just go ahead and throw things away and take the loss on it, so that your mind says, hey, I don't want to take a loss in the future.
Well, you're either losing the money that you spend on that, or you're losing your health.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Which one do you want to lose?
Exactly. I want to talk a little bit more about this emotion part, because this is actually on a deep level, like something that I think, because why are some people not making the change that we all know we should be making?
It's
right?
100% because we have never been taught how to deal with our emotions. This is a skill that, and I go around and I teach seminars and workshops and I do speaking engagements. And this is a topic that I'm really passionate about, because it's something that's so many people are missing. Like, it's just a skill level that we have been programmed in completely unhealthy ways. So kind of the three biggest problems when it comes to emotions is, one, that we have been told and taught that we should be happy all the time. And that if you're not happy and if you're not in like good vibes only and positive emotions, that there must be something wrong. And so we create shame and blame and self-judgment and criticism and feel like there's something wrong with me because today I'm feeling sad, or today I'm feeling stressed. And the truth is that when I teach a concept called 50-50, life is 50-50. 50% of the time, you're going to experience negative emotions. And that's by design. If we didn't have those, we need that contrast to actually experience the positive emotions. So the problem is we never learned how to deal with what I call the shitty 50, the 50% of life that sucks. And the way that we were programmed to deal with those emotions were to escape them. So I grew up with a typical Jewish mother that was always wanting to give me food to feel better. It's like, if you're not feeling good, have a treat and, eat something. So as an adult, that's what I did. And that's what so many of us do is, I don't feel good, I'm going to eat something so I can feel better.
And eat every single thing on your plate because you don't want to waste the food, right? Is another thing.
That's like a whole other programming that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
So either we've been programmed to kind of act out our emotions, like through yelling, or even it can get to the extreme of like violence, physical or verbal, or numb or escape using food, or even there's many ways we kind of numb out: overeating, over drinking, overworking, overspending, over distracting, whether that's like picking up our phone. We don't even realize we're reacting to our emotions often, but it's like we feel this unpleasant emotion and our primitive brain's like, that doesn't feel good. How can I feel better instantly? So we grab these things that are right there for us to escape, but then we never learn the skill of actually understanding our emotions and processing them and not making them a problem, so we don't feel like we need to run away from them. And often those are with bad habits, like habits that create more problems in our lives. So negative emotions on their own are harmless, but the way that we react to them is not.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. This is actually an area of my life that I'm doing a lot of work on. I actually went through a Kabbalah course recently, which I loved. Actually, it's called Kabbalah 1. I think you could look it up online. And David is a friend of mine who teaches that course. It's an unbelievable teacher. And just the core concept, one of the first concepts and core concept that you learn is, so the whole purpose is really to stop being reactive right? To if I can lessen my reactiveness, right? So when something comes up and I immediately want to say like, oh, or react or say something or get angry, you say pause, you pause, and then you say, what a pleasure. Like, what a pleasure. Not what a pleasure that like this bad thing happened to me, or like, it could even be like, hey, there's, you got hit with a a lawsuit or something bad, whatever. Pause, what a pleasure. Well, it's not a pleasure that you got hit with the lawsuit, but the pleasure is that this is a challenge that's been presented to you in your life. And when you show that you can overcome this challenge, that you're elevating yourself to a higher level, to someone who's not just going to get mad and angry and go to these lower level emotions. When you can go to higher level, then what you've done is you've expanded your own vessel, and then more, you can achieve greater things and do greater things in your life from that.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And it is about increasing your mindfulness of creating that pause. And in that pause, you can choose mindfully of how you want to respond to the situation, how you want to think, and how you want to approach, the next thing. So that's
Exactly.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
there's
it.
another great book I'll mention as well called The Upside of Stress, which I really loved. I wish I could remember the lady's name who wrote it, but it was a brilliant book. Highly recommended, especially for very driven people. The Upside of Stress, and it helps you kind of reframe things, right?
Yeah.
Because when we think about stress, right, like what's stressful for me is not stressful for Elon Musk, right? What is stress really? Like in a way, it's all sort of a mental construct.
It's completely mental. I mean,
Yeah.
stress is caused by your thoughts.
Hmm.
And we're all going to have different thoughts about different situations. And I always give the example when I'm teaching about this, like COVID is this neutral thing.
Hmm.
And you can take 10 people in a room and they will have completely different thoughts about it, or even like, let's say the vaccine or something like that.
Hmm.
And this thing itself is neutral, but we're all going to have different thoughts based on our programming, based on our culture, based on our beliefs, based on our identity. So whenever, and one of the things I teach with emotions is first we have to even recognize what emotion we're in. Is it stress? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it shame? And then we can find, okay, why? Ask yourself the question, why am I feeling whatever stress? And then your brain will tell you the subconscious thought that you're thinking that created the stress. And then you can realize, okay, that's just a thought. That's
Mm,
not a fact. That's just the thought my brain offered me because of whatever reason. And then we can question that thought. And then we can decide, okay, I don't want to think that. I don't want to believe that. What do I want to think about this situation in a way that empowers me, that helps me actually feel the way I want to feel, or approach the situation the way I want to approach it. So that's one
love
of the
that.
things in terms of understanding our emotions, is recognizing they come from our thoughts. It doesn't,
Yeah.
like, emotions don't just kind of descend on us. And this is, I talk about this in terms of motivation, because this is a big one in terms of people wanting to change. And the biggest thing I hear is, I'm just not motivated.
Mm,
And as if motivation just happens to you.
mm.
And you have to create motivation. You generate motivation by thinking about what you want and why you want it, and all these thoughts that you create on purpose. And comes kind of back to the morning routine thing, is that's when you create motivation for yourself. But
Right.
you have to create it. You can't just, I mean, sometimes we get it for free. Maybe we listen to something and we, create those thoughts, but it is always self-generated, which gives us the power to generate it whenever we want to.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Love that. This is great. I love talking about this kind of stuff. We could talk about this for
Oh yeah,
hours.
me too.
Yeah, I know I've already taken gone a few minutes longer than I told you we would, but I've just been loving this conversation. So I want to really thank you, Donna, and please tell people how they can get a hold of you, find you, if they want to work with you or learn more from you.
Yeah. So right now I'm hanging out on Instagram quite a bit, and it's just my name, Dana Skoglund, spelled with an A, Dana. And if your listeners want to say hi there, I can actually give them a blueprint and of the actual like times of the day, so that they can see where their kind of daily routine fits with this, what I call the Thrive Blueprint, and help them start to create those shifts.
Great. So it's actually, I want to make sure everyone gets a spelling correctly. So it's at Dana, but it's spelt like Dana, right?
Yeah,
So it's at Dana Skoglund, Skoglund, right?
that's right. Yep.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, and then I think you also have your website, which is your
Yep.
name as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much
Perfect,
everywhere. Same. Dana Skoglund, Facebook, Instagram, website, all the
perfect.
places. Yeah. And I have tons of resources. So whether it's the emotional part or the Ayurvedic part, or the daily routines or habits, if you reach out and tell me what you're looking for, I've got lots that I can send your way.
Great. And you're doing individual coaching as well as other kind of trainings for people as well?
Yeah, so I have my signature program is based on building the habits of Ayurveda into your life using the 3E method. So you not only learn what to do to experience thriving health and peak performance, but also how to make permanent changes that stick so that you can actually be consistent with the things that help you feel great every single day.
Amazing, amazing,
And then
awesome,
yes, one-on-one coaching as well.
great.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Donna. This has been a pleasure for me. I've learned a lot and just really enjoyed this conversation. So thanks for what you're doing and for all the people that you're helping. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.